Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Accounting Principles in Parker and Lynch session around succession planning and leadership development. My name is Sam Osborne. I'm a marketing specialist for the Accounting Principles in Parker and Lynch brands. We are very excited to be here today and talk to you about the various trends in the workforce, particularly the accounting and finance verticals, generational differences that you'll encounter in many corporations and organizations, and how to craft a succession plan that fits your organization and its strategic needs, one that works and works for you. So we have much information, very relevant and very topical to cover today. So let's get started. First, a few introductions. Laura Schrader is Vice President of Accounting Principles in Parker and Lynch Consulting. Laura, a proud diehard Oregon Duck, go Ducks. A native of Oregon, Laura now lives in the beautiful gem state of Idaho with her husband and family. So we'd like to thank Laura for joining us from the mountains. And holding it down for us in the plains today is Travis Lewis, Area Director for our Kansas City branch. He's a Benedictine College alum and a diehard Kansas Jayhawk basketball fan. It's a great team to be a basketball fan of, that's for sure. Also a Royals fan and just overall a proud son of Kansas. So Travis, welcome. Who is Accounting Principles? We have over a quarter century of experience providing clients with custom solutions for executive recruitment services within the accounting and finance verticals. Those include contract to hire, direct placement, various other project resources. And we often partner with our sister division, Parker and Lynch, to offer a full range of accounting and finance recruitment. Parker and Lynch focuses on high-level, executive-level, C-suite associates, controllers, CFOs, CEOs, as well as consulting services, whereas Accounting Principles focuses on accounts payable, receivable, senior accountants, budget analysts, financial analysts of various stripes. But with over 70 branches around the country, over 15,000 placements in 2017, 4 million candidates in our database, and over 1,000 full-time colleagues across our brand and our three other sister brands, we're proud to be part of the #1 global HR organization in the world. And you can see here we have a broad national reach and the resources of a national, even a global firm. But with our various branches, we like to think we bring the strengths of a boutique local staffing service to bear upon your company's staffing challenges and to provide the right solutions for you when you need them. Now, the Adecco Group is the world's largest staffing firm based in Zurich, Switzerland, and with the North American headquarters in Jacksonville, Florida. And as you can see here, Accounting Principles and Parker and Lynch are two of the 4 finance and office brands that serve professional staffing in this country. Agilon, they cover HR, supply chain and logistics, general office and administrative staffing, as well as non-clinical healthcare needs. Paladin, they're kind of our creative design, communications, and marketing niche. So staffing in those verticals is covered by our Paladin brand. And a few other brands with which we are associated are Special Counsel, which handles legal staffing for attorneys and law firms and legal departments across the country. And Modus is our science and engineering vertical. So we have a lot to cover today, and to start off, we'll be talking about the current accounting and finance labor landscape. What does the industry look like? How does it compare to the broader economy overall? And trends around the changing workforce. What's going on? What's different than it used to be? What are we looking at in the near future? And you can't have a succession plan if you can't hire, retain, and develop the right people the way you want and need them. So we'll be spending some time on examining the different generations and what matters to each of them uniquely so you can successfully integrate all 4 of these very vibrant, dynamic, and unique generations into a singular, holistic unit that use each other's strengths, mitigate against each other's weaknesses, and can accomplish strategic goals as a cohesive whole. Then we'll be talking about the important aspects to consider as you build your succession plan and how to get started. And then we'll do a brief review as well as some Q&A. So first, a poll question. When should the process of succession planning begin? In the beginning, when you're ready to retire, after 3 years of positive cash flow, or when you're ready to sell the company? Give you a few moments to answer that. Okay, we did pretty well. Like you said, in the beginning, it's pretty self-explanatory, but delaying a succession plan spells trouble. It might be related to future concerns, but the responsibility of today is ensuring that you're prepared for the future. So working on a succession plan is something that should take top priority in your business if you want to remain a going concern. Second poll question. The best way to make sure you have the right people is A, force competition by doubling up, B, keeping who you already have, C, letting go of least valuable staff members, or D, be transparent about hiring. Okay, the correct answer was D, be transparent about hiring. Being very clear in your communications to existing and potential employees is a great way to make sure you attract the right people, you hire the right people, and you retain the right people. Because if you have the wrong people in the wrong roles, as you'll see later in this presentation, the turnover costs can be high. Third poll question, which generation is currently the main reason for your succession planning? Now this may vary for you, but of the 4 choices, baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, or Gen Y, or Gen Z, which can be called iGen. That's right, baby boomers. Despite some coming back in the workforce after the 2008 financial crisis and having to recoup some of that lost equity from the market crash, a lot of baby boomers now are enjoying a very healthy retirement and are retiring in very high numbers. And with them as they retire, there goes a lot of experience and organizational knowledge that needs to be passed on to the next generation. And a succession plan should factor that into account. Next poll question. On average, how many accounting firms or departments have a formal succession plan in place? A, 25%, B, 30%, C, 50%, D, 60%. Okay, get those answers in. It's B, 30%. So not even a third of all accounting firms or accounting departments have a formal succession plan in place, which leaves them vulnerable to the vicissitudes of the labor market, of the whims of their current leaders who may retire unexpectedly or early, and they haven't been coached up on maybe mentoring a replacement or grooming successors. So once again, this proves that 70% of firms and departments need to kind of get on the stick as far as getting a succession plan in place and make it known to their organization. Now we're going to cover the current accounting and finance labor landscape. And so we just want to look at kind of the job market, the employment trends, and some of the hiring trends that we're seeing across the country. As you can see here, the national unemployment rate as of the recording of this webinar sits at 3.7%. That is a low we haven't seen in decades, specifically the tail end of 1969. So we're looking at for most people in their lifetimes, the lowest unemployment has yet been. And it's even more dramatic for the accounting and finance verticals, sitting at 2% unemployment. So the best talent is employed, the next to best talent is employed, and even the mediocre to not so great talent is employed. So filling some of the needs you have, and there's the number of people trained up particularly in high-skilled areas like finance and accounting, does not meet the need for most employers. So you're fighting among the existing talent pool, and that can get very competitive very fast. There were 9.2 thousand accounting finance jobs created in October 2018. So year over year, that means over 131,000 jobs were created in accounting and finance over the last 12 months. So despite the job market being as tight as it is, accounting and finance fields remain a very attractive, a very lucrative, and a very high-performing segment of the market. So there's something to be watched. Now I'm going to throw it over to Travis, who's going to cover a few more metrics.
I can tell you from what we're seeing just through our company nationwide, my local office here in Overland Park. I've actually been here for 20 years, and this is historically the number one year we've seen since I've been here as far as with the company. And it's getting more and more competitive to get the top people as far as in the marketplace. Hence what we call we're in that talent war. It makes it even more important that you guys are looking at creating a succession plan for your organization and retaining your top talent. If you look as far as salary increases, now when you're seeing all the hiring going on, what that does, and you're seeing the low unemployment rate, simple economic supply and demand that's creating inflation. So we're seeing increase in salaries. You're seeing right here expected accounting and finance salary growth was 6% in 2018. I've seen things as much as 10, 15% as far as growth on those salaries, with companies again fighting for that top talent in the organization. So I'm not sure if you guys are seeing that in your own company, but again, definitely we're seeing on our side of things. If you look at growth, expected growth through 2024, we're looking at 11% growth for accounting and finance, which is above average for all the occupations. And we're seeing a 9% growth as far as in the financial industry, expected growth through 2024.
All right, so we do want to, as we consider some of the current factors that are impacting the workforce in the accounting and finance world, it is important to understand some trends that we're seeing regarding new college grads and their path into the career world. Many of you likely had your start in public accounting, so I think it's interesting to see those trends in the public accounting space. And this is a representation of the new grads that were hired by CPA firms from 1971 to 2016. In 2016, hiring of new accounting grads actually slowed 19% after reaching some historic highs in the previous 4 years. And the AICPA had indicated that their thought was that it was related to the advances in technology and how that has slightly decreased the need for such a high number of entry-level accounting grads. However, good news with a lot of demand out there from the private sector is that accounting is still the number 4 overall college major just last year, and 16.7% of overall new grads are attaining an accounting degree. Overall, almost 80,000 accounting bachelor's and master's degrees were awarded in 2016. And there was a slight dip in the previous 2 years, but part of that was coming from a decline in some master's degrees. New hires that are entering into public accounting that are assigned to taxation actually increased by 9 percentage points, and assignment to the accounting and auditing sector increased by 5 percentage points. So we saw a bigger, slightly bigger group of people go into the taxation side. And the number of CPA exam candidates increased 13% year over year. There was a survey-based report called the Job Outlook from the National Association of Colleges and Employers, and the top 2 in-demand bachelor's degrees are finance and accounting for the last few years, and over 57% of companies are planning to hire someone with those degrees. As far as how that relates to public accounting, according to the AICPA, 16 of the 20 responding firms in the largest firm size category indicated that they would be hiring the same number or more accounting grads in 2017 and beyond. All right, so let's talk about some of the factors that are impacting the workforce around retention, turnover, and retirement. We need to understand the trends of these 3 areas when we are developing our succession plan. So today's workforce is really made up of 4 distinct generations, each with its own preferences about how they like to work and to be managed. And I'll tell you guys, the war on talent is absolutely real right now. Low unemployment rates mean that the most skilled workers are few and far between, and with top-tier employees in high demand, and younger workers not afraid to move companies in order to advance their career, retention is just as important as recruitment. The accounting industry is also somewhat siloed because it requires such specific skills and certifications. What's more is that once you have someone trained on your processes or your software or trained within your department, to have them leave is absolutely a disruption and can be a waste of resources. According to a recent report by Glassdoor, American workers will change jobs 11.4 times by the age of 48, with 25% of them changing jobs 15 times or more. And a really important stat to think about as you're looking at your succession plan and thinking about the team that you have in place is that at any given time, as many as 51% of all employees are considering a new job. Really important statistic to keep in mind when building your succession plan is you may lose people who are key to that plan. Younger workers are more likely to change positions for perceived growth than older workers, but I do want to provide just a little caveat on that. And what you'll see here is you'll see some interesting information about kind of that stereotype of the disloyal millennial, and the millennial is the big job hopper. It's a little bit contradicted when you look at some of the hard data, and this is actually some information that came out from The Economist about a year ago. Millennials may spend less time in a specific job, but overall they're just as loyal as previous generations to their existing employers. The BLS data shows that workers that are age 25 and over now spend a median of 5.1 years with their employers, which is slightly more than in 1983. And yes, job tenure has declined for that lower end of the age group, that 25 to 34-year-old millennial generation, but only slightly. Men between the ages of 25 and 34 now spend a median of 2.9 years with each employer, which is down from 3.2 years in 1983. So young people have moved jobs on a similar timeline as previous generations in the same age bracket. And I think we've all heard some of the stereotypes about millennials, but what the data is telling us is that they're really not different than the other generations have been around that same age timeline. And in fact, middle-aged men are the ones who have tenures who have actually dropped over the last few decades. All right, so why do employees leave? Well, there's three main reasons. First being higher pay, second is better culture and benefits, and then third would be more growth opportunities. So let's take a look at some of these to see how we can minimize turnover for those key employees that are part of your succession plan. It's really no secret, money is a major motivator for employees, and there was a survey by 60 Minutes that found that 35% of respondents actually say it's the most important factor for them when they're considering a job opportunity. Glassdoor found that a 10% pay increase can keep employees on staff, as that's the typical raise that most are looking for if they're looking at an external opportunity outside of your organization. Culture, so culture is defined as the way that an organization operates internally, and it includes things like benefits, things like flexibility such as telecommuting or flex hours, or really any arrangement that would increase that work-life balance for employees. And there was a global survey by Ernst & Young that saw that 74% of respondents say that they want flexibility. That's a pretty overwhelming number, and definitely something that companies really should be looking at when they're building their retention and their succession plan to keep the employees invested for the long haul. Growth opportunities, very, very important for those younger workers. The millennials and the Gen Zers are much more likely to look for other employment if they feel they can't advance within their current company. So by providing training and advancing their skills and communicating your plans for them in your succession plan, you're investing in their future, which makes them feel appreciated and valued. All right, so one more poll question here. Have you made a bad hire in the past? We'll just give everyone a minute here. All right. I think like myself, I could certainly admit that I have made a bad hire in the past, and it looks like the majority of you have also made a bad hire in the past. Very common, but I think sometimes we overlook the impact and the risks of making a bad hire, and so we'll talk through some of those. When we talk about turnover, the cost of turnover is pretty staggering. Typically, it's around 2.5 times their salary after you factor in recruiting, replacement, and onboarding expenses, not to mention your time and your staff's time to retrain someone. In addition, there are some more concerning facts around the cost of turnover. It costs 41% of companies over $25,000 and 25% of companies over $50,000. Turnover can lead to 11% fewer sales in some cases, and it can also add an additional 37% in recruiting and training costs. In worst case scenarios, it can also lead to legal issues, which happens to approximately 9% of companies. So I think we can all see that not only is turnover disruptive, but it is also very expensive.
Let's talk about why we make bad hiring decisions. And the majority of that's going to be usually comes from just a lot of times it's desperation, especially in this environment we're in where we're battling for talent. You may see it in your own company, organization, your department, where you lose somebody in your department and it's taking too long as far as to find the right person. And like I said, the longer you go without that person in the seats, you tend to make more of those desperation type hires. So you got to really kind of plan ahead. For me, I would get a good relationship with your talent acquisition team. I think it's always good to have a good relationship with an external recruiter. So you guys can be proactive as far as when you are looking at your departments, you're looking at the talent you need, that you're proactive in that. And that you're staying true to what you're looking for as far as in that person you're trying to put in that seat. Sometimes maybe that empty seat's better than the wrong person in that seat. So try to stay away from the desperation. Try to be more proactive as far as in your hiring. You know, sometimes 21% is just due to insufficient talent or ability. Again, that goes back to being more proactive and staying ahead of it. Again, having a good relationship with your talent acquisition team, talking about the talent you're looking for within your group, department, having that relationship with that external recruiters as well too. I think those are important. Use your network, your referrals as much as you can to find that talent for your group. And as far as if you look at 34% they just don't work out. And sometimes you look at just your internal best practices, what you're doing. 11% of those polled didn't even check references. So sometimes we get in that interview and we look at that candidate and they sell us for that hour that we're with that candidate. We feel really good about that, and which is obviously an important piece of it. But you got to make sure you're doing those references with those supervisors, past managers that can really tell as far as what they did with their company and the value they can bring to your organization. So just make sure you're not taking, losing steps, maybe again out of desperation. You want to move fast sometimes to get the right talent, but you still got to make sure you're hitting all the, as far as doing everything as far as your steps in your hiring process as well too. If you look as far as, kind of what we look at, the retirement and looking at the baby boomers and the reason why you need to be looking at your succession planning. Back in '99, basically the baby boomers peaked with about 78.8 million people in the workforce. If you look at the last 4 years, though, we've lost 8 million baby boomers that have dropped from the labor market. And in 2015, millennials actually surpassed baby boomers as the largest as far as generation in the workforce right now. So you've got to look as far as challenges within your own organization when you see this and start thinking about, the baby boomers who are retiring at this rapid rate, that knowledge is going out the door. Ask yourself if your company has a plan in place to make sure when that person's retiring or leaving your group, you're losing that that knowledge not going out. You've got a good transition plan and a good succession plan and a good mentoring plan set up with your baby boomers transitioning that information to those millennials as well too. So very important. If you look at the next piece of it, the generational mix in today's workforce. Take a look at your company, take a look at your department, look at the mix of the generations that you have as far as, what's your department? Are you heavy on the baby boomers, Gen X, the millennials? What kind of diversification do you have in your department? Think about how you can mix those generationals, again, from a succession planning to setting maybe your baby boomers up with the millennials from, again, that mentorship roles and those things. How to motivate, how to retain those people. And so again, you have a good plan moving forward so your company can be successful long term. And one thing we want to talk about too is when we look at those generations, kind of the traits and the tendencies of each of those. What keeps them motivated? What's going to help you as far as retaining them? Again, so you can further develop your succession plan.
So as you consider some of the different traits and tendencies of each of the generation, which we're going to go through each one here, really consider how you can utilize those strengths to develop them into the leaders that you need for your plan. So we'll talk first about the oldest generation in the workforce, the baby boomers, also known as the me generation. Most baby boomers came of age in the post-World War II era. They enjoyed a childhood marked by peace and prosperity for the most part, and boomers are very career-focused and are more likely to be loyal to their employer than later generations. They enjoy demonstrating their worth and do not respond typically well to micromanaging. This is largely because they're great managers themselves and actually enjoy mentoring the younger workers. They were instilled with great work ethic and are often considered to be workaholics by some of the younger generations. But this is a generation, if you give them respect and room to work, they'll reward you with that loyalty and the hard work. Next, we'll talk about the Gen Xers, and just to note too, these are some generalities about each generation. You'll find that you have people in your departments who maybe don't fit into all of this, but really focusing on what some of the strengths are of each generation, seeing how that plays into your current team, and then where can you utilize them as you succession plan. So Generation X is the next generation in the workforce, and they were also known as the latchkey kids. I actually learned recently what the latchkey kid meant, and for those of you who may not know, this was really the first generation that for many of them had two working parents, and so they would come home from school and they would have their key and they'd let themselves into the house, and they would be somewhat independent and unsupervised for a portion of the day, and so they had this nickname, the latchkey kids. Generation X is highly motivated and self-reliant. They know how to control their own futures. And when it comes to communication, Gen X prefers rapid, informal communication. They tend to work well as part of an integrated team, and many of them enjoy that open workspace concept where the ideas can flow freely. This is a generation that has witnessed a lot of corporate scandals and company pensions go bankrupt, so they've developed a bit of a natural skepticism. And they're less likely to be lifetime employees than their predecessors. Gen Xers are also very task and goal driven. They like to work efficiently so that they aren't working 24/7. And this generation was really kind of the first age group to participate in a significant priority shift towards that work-life balance. They work to live, not live to work, and they place a huge priority on the family life outside of the office. Although this generation was not raised with technology in the same way that we see it now, they have definitely embraced it. They've put a lot of effort into learning new skills and programs to keep their resume sharp. And this generation has seen a lot of turmoil and change, both in the technology sector as well as in just their path out of college. And so they're able to really adapt to any situation as a result.
As we discussed, the millennials who overtook the baby boomers in 2015, this group is basically, they grew up as far as in an economy that was one of the worst we've ever seen from the Depression, the recession. And with that, a lot of them didn't come out of the workforce. They stayed in school. So you see a highly educated group in this as far as what they've done. They were very tech savvy. They basically cut their teeth on technology, learning computers as they learned to read. This generation, they grew up with Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. So they're very tech savvy, innovative. They're naturally collaborative. They actually function well in team settings. This generation is very open-minded and values diversity in the workplace, probably more than any group before them. And like Gen X, millennials value that work-life balance. Flexibility is a very important aspect of a company culture in their eyes. In fact, if you look at most of them, they take as much as a $10,000 pay cut in exchange for the ability to work from home, work remotely, or have flexibility as far as in their schedule. They want to have their work. They want the work to have meaning. They want that workplace to be positive. Millennials want to develop opportunities. They want to seek out mentors. Again, this is a good opportunity to help them grow, a great chance to match them up with some of the experienced boomers. They desire that open communication, feedback. They like the recognition when things have gone well. They also want that open door communication policy, and from top to bottom it's important to this group. So again, making sure they have that recognition, they like that collaboration, and that open door policy. If you look at Gen Z, This one is kind of a different generation. I've got one of these at home. Mine's a senior in high school. But and many of these right now, they're being recruited locally as far as at the colleges. But this is the last generation currently in the workforce, the second segment of the millennials or Generation Next. They're called, again, that Z generation. But they're more entrepreneurial. They desire more independent work. They have more interest in starting their own business, maybe than even going to grad school. They're less focused. They grew up staring at their iPhones probably, texting. The communication is very different. They're very independent as far as their communication style. A lot of times, like I said, they're open to doing more texting than they were even talking and communicating. But they're probably the most accepting of all the groups of any generation, from a culturally, racially, ethically diverse generation. They're expert multitaskers. They're able to shift between work and play with multiple distractions happening in the background. Again, the most tech-savvy generation that we've seen, as they were born into a world with the most developed technology. They're extremely driven to succeed. They can be stubborn, pragmatic. They also come across a little maybe entitlement, impatient, as they've grown up at an age when everything was readily available at their fingertips without having to wait. And they're very aware of the importance of networking. They believe their success will come from their networks rather than maybe some of their own qualifications. They tend to have short attention spans. Again, therefore they need a variety of tasks to keep them engaged. They need to have a good work environment because stress and interpersonal conflict will make them more distracted. Again, so focus on keeping these individuals engaged, and you'll have a lot more success as far as that generation. And like I said, this will be the most, again, technical savvy generation we're going to see in our lifetime to date. Let's talk about why we develop a succession plan. Or I guess we have a poll here. I'm sorry. So if we had to pick one, which is the most dominant generation in your organization, what would you pick? Baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, or Gen Z? I'll give you a few minutes here to get your results. Interesting. So it looks like for that poll, the most is Gen X, 117. Interesting. Let's go to the next one, Laura. So why develop a succession plan? We've been talking about it here, and you probably understand some of the importance of, why you need to have a succession plan in your organization. It's crucial to the success for several reasons. Your long-term success of your organization. I think it's important to ask yourself or your company, what does your succession plan look like today? If you lost one of your key employees, what would you do? Have you developed that person for that role? If someone were to walk out of your organization today, could you have somebody that could step into that role? You got to be ready for this because we're definitely in that war on talent. It is so hard to find the people to replace that person, where it's just so much more efficient if you can develop that person internally. If you're hiring as far as your candidates right now, look at the potential not only for what the job they're doing today, but what that job they can do in the future for your organization and how you can move them up. I think it's important as far as for setting up your own successor. It'll allow you to plan for your next career move, whether you plan up to maybe to retire, or you're looking for the next opportunity. You're going to be able to do this guilt-free when you feel good about that next person who, when you leave that organization or you move up in your organization, you've got somebody competent that can step into that role. So very important as far as on the succession planning.
All right, and just so everyone knows, we do know that there was a question in the poll that was skipped. That's fine. That was not a valid question, so we will not be counting that one for any type of CPE credit. So hopefully that will answer some questions that we're getting. But just moving on with the developing leaders from within, formal development plans are really designed to help keep your top talent in place. If your employees know what you have planned for them and the direction that you envision for them, they'll feel like you're investing in their futures, and they'll reward you with plans to stay. they're much less likely to be poached by other companies in this type of a setup. When you promote an internal employee, you eliminate months of training. This person already knows your company, your staff, and how things operate. And there was a survey done by of corporate leadership members by the Development Dimensions International, which found that roughly 3/4 of companies globally are not confident in their ability to staff strategic leadership positions over the next 5 years. What is really interesting is that the failure rates of external leadership hires that were observed by this group, the Development Dimensions International, are much higher than when you go with an internal hire and you work through that succession plan of promoting people up from within. So 34% of senior executives fail when they're hired from externally, compared to 24% that are hired internally. And organizations who hire externally into those middle management positions, more than 25% of the time have almost double the turnover rates of organizations who promote from within. So I think those are some statistics that just really speak to the importance of succession planning and making sure that your staff knows the future and the growth path that you see for them in the organization. Internal promotions do fail sometimes. They fail 14% of the time, but that's compared to a 22% failure rate of external hires and promotions. So on the right-hand side here, you will see a chart with the top 10 skills gap. This chart is according to a 2015 study that was conducted by the Competency Crisis, which is a coalition of finance professionals, employers, students, and professors, and it was organized by the IMA, or the Institute of Management Accountants. It was really interesting. So participants were asked to rank 25 skill areas in terms of their importance in the success of entry-level management, accounting, and finance professionals, and then the degree to which they find that candidates currently possess those skills. So the number on the right side is the average difference between the skill needed for success and the skill currently possessed by those entry-level management, accounting, and finance professionals. I think you'll see here that this really shows why it's crucial, but of course, leadership being the number one biggest skills gap there. So how do we start to plan for that in our departments? How do we start to take our less experienced employees or our younger employees and start to give them some of those leadership skills that they may not have had access to or had any mentoring available to them? Areas like planning, budgeting, forecasting, that is the second biggest skills gap that they found through the IMA survey. And then that strategic thinking and execution. Again, those are some of those skills that they don't teach those in college, and these are things that we have to develop and really help train people when they're in our departments to implement our true successful plan of growth for them. And the thing is, too, outside hires may be suffering from these same skills gaps, and you just don't know it. But with internal employees, you can really control their learning, and you can implement a plan to close those key skill gaps before they're promoted into higher positions. All right, so it's important to develop a succession plan that actually works, of course. So we're going to talk about some ways that we can do that. So first and foremost, it's important to recognize talent early and start developing these people when they're in junior and mid-level positions as we bring them up through the ranks. Even if they're not ready now, but you see the potential, they're worth investing in. And again, it provides them with that clear path of growth for themselves, which will increase the loyalty and increase your retention. In addition to having more tenured employees mentor younger employees, you can also flip the script and you can have some of your less experienced workers mentor your more seasoned workers to teach things like technology skills, for example. Seeing how some of your less experienced employees handle being in a position of authority, particularly over someone who is more experienced, more tenured, will be a really great test of his or her emotional intelligence and their communication skills. Diversity, very important to ensuring that your company is coming up with the best services possible. So keep that in mind as you pick successors. You want multiple backgrounds and schools of thought, experience levels in order to be represented on your leadership team to achieve that balance. Although it's important to understand generational characteristics, like we said, we know that not everyone who belongs to a certain group will take on all the behaviors of that group. So it's important to look beyond some of those negative generational stereotypes that we all hear about, focus on the positives, and focus on the things that they bring to the table that will make them great leaders. Recognition, definitely a universal motivator. Everyone enjoys feeling appreciated for their hard work. I think that we've probably all been in a situation where we felt like we didn't receive any recognition for something that we did, or maybe where we realized we didn't recognize someone in the way that we needed to. Although recognition is important to everyone and is a universal motivator, one size does not fit all, and I think that you want to stay away from a blanket approach. Get to know your employees and know if they prefer to be recognized publicly or privately. That's a really big thing. If possible, monetary rewards can be a huge incentive in recognition, and keeping in mind that the size of the reward should be relative to the task completed. And sometimes it's not possible in many companies to offer cash rewards, so just something a little extra, even if it's like a gift card or an extra afternoon off, those things can go a really long way when you think about the recognition factor. And of course, never underestimate the power of a simple thank you. If you do nothing else, always say thank you, and I think that small action carries far more weight than any of us realize.
I think more important now than any, again, with the talent war and the unemployment rate the way it's going, and it's going to continue to have this trend as far as it's something you're going to battle here on out. So that succession planning is so important now for your organizations and for the top organizations to be successful. If you're not doing this, you're going to be behind. But when you're looking at these, you got to be looking at 5, 10, 20 years down the road to make your plan. Some key things that you want to help to construct this plan. You want to list out what positions are critical to your operation, which again of those are the most difficult to fill if you had a vacancy. Then you want to go into identifying your top performers. You want to see the skills they have to offer with respect to potentially moving up in the organization. As you go through your top employees and their skill sets, be able to identify any talent gaps that you have there that you might need to be filled, or you need to look at those as far as your organization saying, we don't have the person that can step into this type of role. This is where we have a hole in our organization where we may have to go outside, or looking at where you need to develop those people internally to move that next level and make sure you have a good plan for that. I think you have to be realistic about your timeline when you're making some of these as far as the shifts and so forth. But this is so important as far as, again, the most critical thing I think is just having that long-term plan with your organization and looking at that 5, 10, and 20 years. When you're developing this plan, you need to identify your successors. So, you got to find out your strongest employees as far as when you're constructing that succession plan, developing a type of checklist for employees as far as what their talents are, how you can develop them. Many of you may in your organization have certain things like you have maybe an annual review. I'd probably recommend having more touches than just the annual review, maybe maybe quarterly. Sometimes you have your talent acquisition team may have a more complex one where they're identifying maybe here's your steady eddies, here's your doers, here's your potential leaders, here's your high performers, and seeing where they rank within the organization and identifying those people and how important that is in the early stages to do that. And make sure you're having communication with those candidates where you've identified them as leaders. Let them know that. Put them on that that development plan. That's going to help you as far as retaining those key people long term. When you're looking at those leaders, you got to look for people who make things happen. They're not afraid to make decisions. They're not afraid to ask for more responsibilities. You want to find people who are engaged. The most likely you think want to stay. So you want to ensure that anyone who you're considering for promotion is engaged and invested in that organization. Your good leaders are going to take ownership of their work, their teams. They're going to want to accept responsibility. When things fail, they want to make it right. If an employee is notorious for shifting blame, making excuses, that's probably not a good potential successor for your organization. Your leaders have got to be able to juggle multiple projects, tasks. The ability to multitask is critical when identifying future leaders within your company. And probably something really important that we forget about is the soft skills. Those are just as important as the hard skills for leadership. So be sure to take note of how an employee interacts with others before considering them for the promotion. Those leaders, they've got to be able to communicate effectively with all kinds of people across all mediums. They need to have that emotional intelligence, be able to read people. And you're going to have so much more success in having those empathetic leaders as opposed to those robotic leaders.
Okay, so when we talk about your development plan, and we've talked quite a bit about retention, but a couple ideas to keep in mind. Salary is still consistently ranked as the most important factor in whether or not candidates will take a new job, and in employees remaining with their current company. This has been observed in many different surveys, and so we really have to continue to assume that cash is king for the majority of people when it comes to recruitment and retention. So definitely make sure you're staying on top of market trends to ensure that your salaries are on par for your industry, your company size, and your location. There are many different salary resources out there online or salary guides. We have our 2019 salary guide that's available if anyone is interested in one. But there are a lot of resources to make sure that you're staying on top of salary trends. Benefits and perks are also very important to retention efforts, and at times, solid offerings in these areas can really keep your staff for longer, even if your budget is too lean to support greater salaries. If your health insurance, your retirement plans, paid time off, and those other essential benefits aren't on par with the industry standard, employees will be tempted to leave your company for greener pastures or what are perceived as greener pastures. Now I know we've all heard about the startup culture and some of those really exciting companies have set the bar very high for workplace perks, sometimes unrealistically. And I know that not every company can afford to provide daily lunches or have the ping pong break rooms. But I think that there are some practical perks that you can institute to make life better for your employees. For example, you could offer a relaxed dress code or half days on Fridays in the summer. And I know that that's something that we've done within our company that has been very, very popular in the summertime, especially with the generations that are so focused on that work-life balance. And as we've touched on already, one of the best perks you can offer is that flexibility. We know it's popular with the millennials, but it's popular really all the way around. Global Workplace Analytics did a survey and found that 80 to 90% of the U.S. workforce would prefer to telecommute, at least part-time, with 2 to 3 days per week kind of being that sweet spot. And that allows for a greater work-life balance and an overall happier employee. But 80 to 90% of the U.S. workforce preferring some sort of telecommute option is really important to think about that stat and what are we doing. We may not offer telecommuting, but what about that work-life balance? The solid onboarding plan, too. This is so important and critical to retention, and sometimes it's often overlooked. By having an effective onboarding process, you really set the tone for your employees on their first day. Ensure that they have a clear description of their job duties and what's expected of them, as well as how your company culture functions. You want them to feel welcomed, so be sure that they're properly introduced to coworkers to give them that sense of community and belonging. And it's a really great idea to set up some sort of a buddy system with them, pairing them up with a more tenured employee in the same position. All right, so once you have your plan, of course, execution is where it all boils down to, and you really want to write it out and make it official. Many of you will have HR business partners that you can work with through this process, but make sure that you are making it official. Set a real timeline for the changes to take place and communicate your expectations. Let the employees involved know the plans that you have for them and what they need to do to make it happen. Doing so helps keep them loyal to your company and less likely to be swayed by some other job offers, especially in a market like we're in right now where we know that unemployment is extremely low. There's a lot of opportunity out there. Create an action plan as well of how that timeline will come to fruition. List out how you will elevate each person's skills and responsibilities, moving them up the ladder. And also identify other colleagues who are going to be part of that process. It does not all have to fall on you as a leader. A big part of developing skills is having someone teach those skills. So seek out people within your department, within your company, who will be a key part of building up those future successors. And at every step in the process, you want to be transparent with everyone involved. They all need to know the plan, how the process is going. If you don't have regularly scheduled reviews with your staff, I highly recommend that you do that to keep them involved and keep those communication lines open. And provide constructive feedback as you move down the succession path. As you're going through your plan and providing feedback to those involved, definitely be sure to evaluate it for your purposes as well. And if adjustments are needed, and they likely will be, don't be afraid to make them. Just because it's down on paper doesn't mean that we cannot adjust as we need to and as we go through the process. But definitely document. Document every step of the process, both for legality and for potential future process improvements. You know, you spent a lot of time laying out this plan. You want to be sure that you follow up on the things that you've laid out in it.
Let's talk about strategies for recruiting and also developing. So one thing you got to look at as far as on the recruiting aspects of the baby boomer generation, millennials, Gen X, Gen Z, if you have one method to, as far as from a recruiting standpoint, to go out and get these different types of generations, the way they look for jobs is so much different than what we've ever seen before. If you're looking at, if your talent acquisition team is just, posting a job and hoping, see who basically applies to that position, you're going to be missing out on a lot of these as far as these different age groups and so forth. For example, if you look at the baby boomers, they'll look at the job boards, they'll look at the career builders, they're more likely to respond to the ads. If you look at Gen X, they're going to do a combination. They'll look at the job boards, but they also have that access to technology. They're more technology savvy. They can be on social media such as your Indeed, LinkedIn, as far as they utilize recruiters and so forth. So they'll be kind of hit both sides of it. Your millennials, though, they're more technical savvy. So they're going to be more on your social media, as far as your Facebook, LinkedIn, texting, as far as how you're going to be able to reach out to them. So you've got to have a good recruiting strategy when you're trying to reach to all different levels within all those generations. As far as if you looked at your hiring process, based on a KPMG survey, the length of the hiring process, they've shortened the recruitment evaluation to 1 day. Candidates will find if they got the job within 2 working days. Companies are trying to move faster as far as on their top talent so they don't lose. When you're going after these people, you don't want to lose. And we're seeing in the workforce right now multiple counteroffers, as far as multiple offers at one time. If a company wants to wait because maybe they want a comparison, but they think they've got that right candidate right in front of them, but they feel, we need to interview more people, and they find out they want to go back to that candidate they originally talked to, and they're gone because they have multiple offers. And we're seeing most of these candidates, top candidates in the marketplace, are lasting 1 to 2 weeks in the market, especially in that staff level, senior level accounting positions. So you got to make sure you're improving as far as the length of your hiring process. These Gen X, if you look as far as the types of companies they want to work for, baby boomers, I'll go back to them. They like the part-time, maybe options, opportunity to mentor. They like the job autonomy. Gen X, they're looking for the work-life balance. They like the family. They like that combination of having time to work hard, play hard type. The millennials, they want that training and development. They want the growth opportunities. They also like the casual team environments. And if you look at our office here, we just redid our office. We've got stand-up desk. It's very collaborative. The millennials, that generation loves the collaboration. They love as far as the traininess of it. It helps attract talent. If you look at Gen Z, they like the good working environment. They like that virtual collaboration, the task variety. They also like the heavy recognition. So when you're going after these different types of skill sets, the different type of generations that you're looking at, you got to have a little bit different as far as strategy and how you're recruiting those folks. Basically, make sure you have also, for those Gen Zs, they want to see the benefit package on full display. They want to see the 2 to 3 weeks of vacation. They want to see tuition reimbursement. They want to see company match retirement plans. They want to see a lot of the perks and benefits. It's not always about just the initial compensation of those folks.
Yeah, that's right. And we also want to talk about, of course, we've talked about retention, but also inspiration. We know that we have to keep our future leaders on board, but we also want to inspire them, and that's going to be key to this process. Boomers have reached the end of their career journeys in many cases, so some short-term financial options and the potential to work part-time if they desire could be important to them. Giving them the opportunity to pass their knowledge on to the next one in line. This is really a win-win. It satisfies many boomers, and it also gives your younger workers more development opportunities. And also be sure that you're practicing formal communication with them, often in person. That's something that they definitely crave. Gen X wants to feel like they're part of something at work, and so from an inspiration standpoint, definitely providing team-building opportunities to promote that collaborative feel, and that work-life balance. That's a huge draw for Gen X. Aside from telecommuting, I would look at additional options to allow them to maximize time with their families. Many Gen Xers like those open workspaces. Travis had just talked about our new office in Overland Park, and we definitely focus on a lot of open workspace and making people feel like they're part of a bigger team. Millennials definitely hungry to move up. Millennials are looking to move into leadership roles. So let them know that there's a career path to follow within your organization and help them obtain the skills to get there. We also know millennials, many of them thrive in a casual environment. Think casual dress, easy communication, and collaboration with teammates. And I know that we've seen that personally in our company as we've had more millennials come into the organization. There have been a lot of requests for more of those kind of casual days in the casual environment. But keep your door open. Let them know how they're progressing. They want to hear from you, and if they don't, they will assume that you don't care. Millennials really want to have input. They want to have that seat at the table. But they also want to know how their daily work impacts the company mission. And I think that that's kind of a disconnect in certain cases. We're not tying back what we're doing with what our employees are doing in the daily work that they're doing and how that really ties to the company mission. So help them see how what they do every single day plays into the bigger picture, and that goes a long way with the millennials. Gen Z, new on the scene, as we've mentioned, but still a key group that we want to make sure we're developing up through the ranks and using their unique skills. Give them a work environment where they can interact positively. This is a group that's very used to being connected, right? We talked about the technology factor. And so they love to use software like GoToMeeting or Slack where they can collaborate virtually from anywhere and it keeps them highly productive. Give them a variety of tasks to keep them interested and inspired and really let them know when they're excelling. Also giving Gen Z access to modern technology. They definitely are not inspired working on antiquated systems. Also, give them some creative freedom for how tasks get done, and give them the opportunity as well to institute process improvements to make work more efficient. As we talked about, this is a group that is very good at multitasking, and I think that we would all be probably surprised to hear some of their ideas for streamlining processes. All right, so we are just at the end of our presentation, and I'm just going to wrap up with a few key takeaways here. But what we did is we put the whole succession planning cycle into a diagram here. And you're likely going to need to repeat this process several times as your department or team could fluctuate, we've talked about. But it starts with understanding the demographics of the workforce and developing that long-term vision for your department. Who are your key existing players? What path will maximize their skills and their leadership attributes? And then where do you need to add key staff and hire the right people to fit into your development plan? Engagement and retention are then the next steps in the process, and you evaluate their progress, and then you shift as necessary and promote to execute the plan. And then the cycle starts over based on new needs for your department or your company.
So here's one thing as far as if you are interested in getting more details on the characteristics of each generation and how to best manage across them, you might be interested in our white paper. So it's Maximize Your Generational Workforce. Learn how to turn your 4 distinct generations and different experience into one cohesive unit. But you can reach out to myself or Laura if you're interested in receiving one of these, and we can get that information over to you.
Great. So unfortunately, we do not have time for the Q&A portion. We've run out of time, but we do have some great questions, and so we'll be sure to answer those in our Accounting Principles blog. We will send a link to the blog to everyone. As far as additional just housekeeping, I know we've had many of you ask about getting the presentation. Yes, we will provide the presentation in a follow-up email along with my contact information and Travis's contact information. If you have additional questions, please reach out to us. We will also be distributing the CPE certificates in a follow-up email, so please be on the lookout for those, but feel free to reach out if you don't receive that in the next few weeks. So I want to say a big thank you to Travis for coming on and joining as a guest speaker on this webinar, and thank you to everyone who attended. We appreciate you coming on. We hope that we've provided some valuable information, and we look forward to talking to you further about your succession plan and putting the right people in place in your department. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Travis. And thank you to all our attendees. And we will hope you have a great day and talk to you soon.